We have come to a point where 99% of entrepreneurs and creators are using ChatGPT and AI in the wrong way in order to create content. How to use AI in a way that will amplify your personal brand and not take away from it and not give other people or your dream clients or your premium buyers the ick, but instead it will literally make it stronger. Welcome back to the podcast. It is I, your host, Malika. Happy Tuesday. Now, I have to say that this is a hot topic that I have been dying to bring up on the podcast because this is now a thing that with content creation, the rise of AI and ChatGPT, everyone is using it. I love ChatGPT. I love AI. Okay, I love it. Absolutely adore it. But there is so many traps that you can so easily fall into that unfortunately waters down your brand and it makes it not special anymore. This is exactly how you can avoid these traps and use ChatGPT and make sure that you are using ChatGPT in a way that is not killing your brand, but it's amplifying it and it's not going to give anyone the ick. All right. So definitely go on your hot girl walk, go grab your matcha, right? I know it's kind of snowy now here in Montreal, but whatever, hot girl walk, there's no season to that. Truly, ChatGPT has its own kind of personality and its own kind of branding. Okay, this is the best way I can explain it. And this is why people can tell, even when sometimes a lot of people think that it's not visible or that maybe you cannot tell or that, that it's amplifying your brand or that you are building your brand through these content that you're creating through ChatGPT. And a lot of people think, that it's it doesn't show or that people can't really tell. But people can always tell because there's such a different frequency and energy behind each post when it's created from truly your brand's voice, your own take and your own things versus creating from the root of AI and ChatGPT, because it does have its own kind of personal brand and branding and way of speaking things into life. And so it does feel, number one, it does feel a lot more generic. And this is the thing that kind of gives your content a hit or miss, right? Because ChatGPT is way more generic than a lot of people think. I'd say that ChatGPT is good for starting off with an idea and then you refining that idea. Or on the other hand, you already have a super mapped out idea and then you're just looking for little tweaks. This is honestly one of the best ways to use ChatGPT. Why? Because you're not losing your brand's authentic voice and it's not dictating every single thing that you are posting or creating. And this is the big trap that a lot of people get into. This tool, okay, is here to help you and make your life easier, but it's not here to guide every single decision and post that you make. That is when it starts killing your brand and it actually starts just being a reflection of someone chatting with ChatGPT. And this is the thing, right? Also from a consumer's lens, so many people are using ChatGPT. I'm using ChatGPT. Your clients are probably using ChatGPT. Right? And so everyone kind of knows what ChatGPT sounds like. I don't know how to explain it other than that. Everyone knows what AI sounds like. Using it to dictate every post that you do or using it to, do your whole creation process is not ever going to be in your advantage because everyone can tell, even I'm sure you can tell also when something sounds like ChatGPT, right? It becomes really hard to create the kind of iconic brand that your premium clients wants to buy in when the root of it is ChatGPT or it's AI or your content comes from that, right? And the thing is that people truly connect with you, with your expertise, with your skill. And these are just not things that like ChatGPT has in a real life environment, if that makes sense. And so yes, it can kind of like help you out with like giving you general ideas, or making your life easier. You are the person with the mastery. You are the person with the skills. You are the person with the energy, right? Like you are the person that your personal brand is always rooted in you, right? This is the number one thing. This is the thing that I always say. So when people can tell that your content is from ChatGPT, right, it doesn't feel as embodied. Does that make sense? Like it doesn't feel like an embodied topic or an embodied thing that you are saying. It kind of just can feel sometimes more like reciting a presentation, right? Embodiment is the thing that makes your premium buyer say like, oh my God, she's the girl that I want, because like she knows exactly what she's talking about, and it shows, right? And these are just the things that like no amount of planning or AI can do for you, which is like the frequency that you bring to your content, right? The energy that's behind it, or even so, I'd say the frequency that you have coming up with an idea, and that it's coming from experience that you've had with your clients, or things that like are just coming up in your work when you are with your client, when you are interacting with them, or when you are practicing your skill or whatever it is that your business is about. There's just like certain things and certain ideas that gets born from that, and these ideas truly hold energy of their own, right? And this is one of the things that makes people so obsessed and crave having you and fall in love with your brand, because this is not something that you can per se explain, or it's just something that you feel because it's so embodied within you, within your experience, within your truth. You just can't really have when you're always looking for ChatGPT to approve every single one of your posts, okay? Because this is also another trap that I see a lot, which is like, okay, like ChatGPT needs to approve all of my posts and everything, when that is not actually the case, right? Like there is a certain way to formulate your copy, your messaging, in a way that's activating and that activates your premium clients. And ChatGPT doesn't know your personal brand like you do, doesn't know your brand's voice like you do, right? And you cannot let AI become your brand's voice. And I also see this happening with, when you are admiring someone that you love their personal brand and like you love the way they create content or whatever, it can sometimes be very easy to get emerge in someone else's world, and then all of a sudden your personal brand kind of becomes an extension of their personal brand. Sometimes it's not even something that like you realize that is happening, just because of the fact that like whatever you're consuming, it will kind of like almost like kind of alter your brain and how you think and your brain chemistry, and then it almost like is an effect that starts happening without you even realizing, and then next thing you know, you kind of sound like that person that you really like their content, but then you kind of sound less like you, and then you don't really know what you sound like or what your style of content is, or what your strategy is. And then like next thing you know, you're like, why doesn't my personal brand feel as iconic as them, or why doesn't it sell as good as them, when like my content seem like really good when I put it next to theirs, right? And that is why. It's because sometimes we don't realize that like we are kind of altering how we're speaking, or how we're formulating our ideas or our strategies based on other things outside of ourselves, that is not really representative of the things that we want or that makes our brand iconic, right? And so something that's so important, okay, is to always use ChatGPT for either starting off with the root of an idea or refining an almost done idea, okay? Because that is when ChatGPT is not dictating all of your personal brand and all of your action and all of your decision, but it's just kind of like refining it or just giving you a little boost. Like that is what it is meant for. It is not meant for, you know, like having your whole brand be that, because ChatGPT as a whole has his own brand, has his own thing, you know, like it's like a species of its own, you know what I mean? The next thing I really want to mention is things that I need you to stop doing immediately if you are doing any of these things, okay? If you are reading your screen while you're doing your content, okay? Like if it feels like you're reading, or like you're reading a presentation, immediately, I feel like this is one of the things that like can instantly kill the trust factor, just because of the fact that, like, you know, your clients are coming to you because of your expertise of what you know, and your audience is coming to follow you because they want like someone that isn't like everybody else, and that isn't thinking the way that everybody else is, or that isn't doing things the way everybody else is doing. And that's why they resonate so deeply with you, right? Or that's why they trust the result that you deliver, or they trust your mastery, or they trust your skill, right? It's because you know your shit, right? But I find that even if you do know your stuff, as soon as it feels like you are reciting something, or that you are reading off a script from ChatGPT, or that you are, it feels like you're reading the screen, immediately it kills the trust factor, because unfortunately it won't feel like it's coming from you. Even if it is, you know, like even if it is, it won't feel like that way, especially for premium buyers, right? Because they want someone who knows their stuff. Like they're not looking for someone who's going to be the polished corporate, everything is perfect. They're looking for the person who knows their shit, right? And that is not giving off, I know my stuff, unfortunately, even if you do, right? And so that is one of the things to immediately stop if you are doing, because unfortunately it will hurt your trust factor a lot. This also like ends up diluting your authority, right? Because like I said, like premium buyers, like they fucking know if you're using ChatGPT, you know what I mean? And so it doesn't feel as embodied, you know? It feels more like they could themselves go on ChatGPT and ask whatever it is that you're talking about, and it would feel like the same worth per se, right? And so that's not what we want to give, because you are like super skilled, and so we need to have your content show that, right? And it can only show that if you are truly embodied in your content. And now I've mentioned this before in a previous episode, but perfection is not what is going to sell. You know, when we think of like content creation, sometimes we think like, you know, my content needs to be perfect, or it needs to be exactly the one piece of content that like that like represent wholly my brand, and it needs to be perfect. And sometimes like that ends up being kind of like the downfall of like, you know, going into a spiral of like overthinking all your content and everything. And the way that I always think of content creation and building, you know, your personal brand is kind of like as an algorithm, right? So think of it as like every single piece of content is part of your own algorithm that builds your brand. People truly crave, you know, authenticity. They crave the person behind a personal brand, behind the content, you know, that is you. That is more rare nowadays, especially to find like real authenticity. And I'm not talking about like, oh, I'm myself and like everyone is themselves and like they're being real and they're who they are and everything. I'm not talking about that kind of authenticity. I'm more talking about having the kind of messaging and content, and especially voice, like, you know, like your brand's voice, like how you deliver your stuff, how you talk, all these things. Like I find that it's even harder now to find that for a lot of people. And you know, if you go on the other side of it, I feel like this is like a great time to also take advantage of that, because a lot of people aren't doing that and aren't delivering their content in their authentic voice, right? Something super important to do when it comes to your content, you know, to building your personal brand, it has to be, you know, finding your brand's voice. Because if it sounds so generic, and again, I find that like ChatGPT is great for like, why I say it so much that like ChatGPT is great for like a seed idea is because everything I find is very generic, and it's also lacking your brand's voice. And so something to do, it's kind of like, okay, you can put an idea in ChatGPT, kind of like the core of your idea, but then you want to always refine it to fit your brand's voice, your kind of messaging, and like deliver it in a way that not everybody else is delivering it, because that is when you get to showcase your mastery. That is when you get to showcase your personal brand. That is when you get to showcase your brand's voice that feels authentic, right? When you are consuming a piece of content, like you want to feel like it comes from the person, like you want to feel like you are connecting with that person. And that's when I find like it becomes so much easier to fall in love with the person's brand, and because it's just so authentic. It's so in their voice. It's so unlike anything out there, right? It's so unhinged. It's really giving iconic, right? And that is the thing I feel like everyone should bring back, and I feel like a lot of people aren't doing right now. And so I feel like even nowadays, like it can be so easy to take advantage of that, because a lot of people are lacking that in their brand, in their content, right? And something that I really want to mention also is that, I feel like when you're creating your brand, you're creating content, and you're like, what's the next best piece of content that I'm going to create? Like a lot of people are thinking from the outside, okay, what am I seeing? What does my clients needs to hear, right? And it's not so much, what am I a beast in? And how will I deliver that in a way that's so fucking iconic to my brand? And it's also when you can look around and look at all the content that is out there, and you can be like, what isn't being done? What isn't being talked about? What is lacking? Nowadays, like the content that truly stand out is always the one that it feels like you've never seen before, right? It feels like you've never seen that before. And so again, with coming back to like ChatGPT to AI, right? It's kind of like, okay, like how are we taking these ideas that like is maybe making your life a bit easier to come up with stuff, but how are we making it in a way that like it's never been done in a way, in that way? Or like your clients will be like, oh my God, this is a piece of content that I've never heard it, right? And that truly comes with your personal brand, with knowing what your personal brand is about. Because if you are again dictating, like letting ChatGPT dictate every single thing, every single piece of content, every single idea, that is when a personal brand unfortunately lacks direction, right? When you can truly know what your personal brand is about, and when you know exactly like, how it's rooted within you, within your skill, within your mastery, that is when it becomes a lot easier, I find, to use ChatGPT in the right way, in a way that doesn't take away from your brand. It doesn't take away from what you're doing. It's not killing it, but it's amplifying it. And that is where we want to get to, I find. Like, using ChatGPT in a way that doesn't take away from your brand and doesn't dictate your brand, but you truly know exactly what your brand is about, and you're just using it to like amplify it a bit, or take like a little root of idea, or maybe like you already have the idea and then you're just looking to refine it a little bit in your brand's voice, and you know exactly like what that is. When you go into ChatGPT and you're like, oh, can you give me ideas for, let's say you're like a relationship coach, and you're like, can you give me ideas for like what my clients needs to hear, what they're gonna resonate about having a healthy relationship or whatever, okay, like how many times has everyone heard that? Oh, have a healthy relationship. It's like, it doesn't hit. You know what I mean? So, when you get the idea that's like very generic, then it's like, okay, now how can we refine it? How can we go into that very generic sentence, or that very generic like idea, and now how can I make this my own idea that's original to my personal brand? That is the way to use ChatGPT in a way that amplifies your brand, because you never want to be so worried about like checking off all the content boxes and not like shoving yourself in every single box every step of the way. In the content world, like there are so many rules that are trying to be pushed onto so many people. Like, okay, if you're a service provider, you have to create your content like this, you have to talk like this. If you're a coach, you have to wear a blazer and whatever. It's so funny, I am wearing a blazer today, but that's not why. But or like I feel like there are so many rules. Okay, like you need to post at this time, you need to post X amount of time and everything, and you need to be posting every single day, otherwise like people are gonna forget about you and whatever. And it's like, I feel like there's all these rules that are just kind of like making it so blurry into like, where's the line? Like, what's the line you have to follow? What's the thing that's good? What's the thing that's not good, right? We need to bring back a lot more of, which is like, being original, like, having that original creativity that's like coming from you, like when was the last time that you just went for a walk and you just like didn't have any stimulation or whatever, and you were just like, okay, like what are some ideas that are coming from me, and not like asking ChatGPT for your content ideas, what are the things that like, when was the last time that happened? Like creativity and originality is something kind of like a muscle, right? And so I feel like the more that like you are just putting more money on the ChatGPT bin and not on your own originality in a way, then like the thing that's going to grow is going to be, ChatGPT giving you ideas for content, and that being kind of like the sole focus of your brand, which is not really original. It's not coming from you. It's not you're rooted in your own creativity. And I feel like that also comes with, kind of like trusting yourself a lot more. I find that like, sometimes we think, oh, like AI knows everything and they know better than me and everything, but that's not actually the case. I find that it also takes a lot of like self-trust to just not have your post, not have every single post approved from ChatGPT, to just create a post and trust within yourself and trust within your own creativity and your own ideas and your own originality that it's good enough, right? And I feel like that's also the other side of AI that like no one's really talking about, which is the self-trust aspect. Because of course it feels so much more validating to go on ChatGPT and be like, is this good? You know what I mean? And ChatGPT is like, this is very great, although you should probably add this to it, and this, and you would change this. And the next thing you know, it sounds like ChatGPT. It doesn't sound like you, right? And so I find that like this is also the bigger aspect of it, which is just having more self-trust, more within your skill, your mastery, your creativity, your originality, and not from a robot. You know what I mean? Because that is essentially the power behind your brand. It is that it is personal to you, personal brand, not AI brand, right? And so anyways, just making a joke, but yeah, that is the thing that like it also comes down to, having more certainty within your craft, within your skill, within you are the expert within what you offer to your clients, that it's a service, an experience, that you bring to them, that they're sitting in your chair and that you're doing their makeup or their nails, or that you're coaching them through like a relationship or mindset work or like manifestation, whatever it is that it's about, right? It's kind of like, it's about like truly trusting in your craft, trusting in yourself, and not being so heavily reliant on something outside of you, essentially. Because your personal brand is truly meant to be rooted within you from the inside, right? Anything that's kind of like outside of you, like ChatGPT or AI or other people, are kind of like just a tool to kind of like maybe refine it more or get feedback from. But it's not meant to dictate and be the root of your content. It's not meant to be the root of your personal brand, And so that's really all that I wanted to talk about, which is, to trust yourself more and to trust that not every single thing needs to be ChatGPT approved. You also know that like, the rules are kind of meant to be broken. Like it's not like, like ChatGPT doesn't know everything. That doesn't really include, breaking the rule, going out of the mold, being rooted so deeply within you and not like ChatGPT, right? Your content is not meant to make you feel like you're suffocating in a box, because when you feel that way, then it kind of becomes boring and you don't like creating your content as much. And then it's not really, it kind of feels the same way also for your clients that are consuming your content. Perfect example for this is that I had a client, okay, in real estate that works with like real estate agent. For them, it kind of felt like, okay, like all of my content needs to be like super serious, and I have to follow the rule book because that's what like real estate content is like and everything. And I was like, what do you mean? Like, like I'm sure, okay, there are so many real estate agents that are bored. They are bored of the content that is out there. That's so serious. That's so strict. That's so boxed in. And they're waiting for someone like you to take it out of the box, to not create boring content. But unfortunately, you're playing by the rule book. And so your brand just becomes normal. It becomes kind of like overlooked, right? And so like, and so when you switch that around, you're like, no, like your content is not meant to be boring. If you yourself find content boring, then that is a sign that there needs to be different content for the kind of client that you actually want to have, right? Because I'm sure there's so many other people that feel the same way as you. They're bored with that content. They're bored with that type of content. They feel it's so boring. They feel like they've seen it 3,000 times. It doesn't do shit for them. And they're literally bored out of their mind watching it. And so they don't watch it. They're literally like watching like people do their target haul instead of like watching real estate, even though they're in that niche. Okay. And so if you yourself are able to break the rule and bring that edge back, right? And that originality of not really following, oh my God, this is how you have to be. This is the way it's always been done. For example, this client was feeling like, okay, like I don't really want to create content that's like so strict and boring and like boxed in. And it's like, you don't have to. You don't have to. And you will be the first one in that environment, in that niche to do that. And so how iconic will that be? How iconic? Like, I'm sure there's so many clients out there that are waiting for that permission to be like, oh my God, like I can be a real estate agent and I can be like hot and I can be like really like empowered and I can like have all these other facet of me and like I can speak this way. And this is not something that, would maybe be ChatGPT approved once again. And so always trusting more of yourself, I find is probably the thing that I want you to take away the most from this week's episode. If you know someone that like is using ChatGPT with their life, okay, like every single thing they do is dictated by ChatGPT, or they're using ChatGPT for their content, like this is the person I tell you to send this episode to. Now, I hope you got so much value. If you did, make sure to leave a like and comment down below what you got from this episode. I'd love to know what you thought of it. And as always, I'll meet you here next week and stay amazing. Bye. Thanks so much for tuning in, and don't forget to leave your 5-star rate and review on the podcast. I'd love to know what you guys think of the episodes, and I will meet you here next week.